Welcome to the Ghost Geeks. I'm Chad, and today we bring you the second part in our three-part series on EMF and K2 meters. And now for the deep dive. Previously, we discussed a few of the types of electromagnetic waves, how the waves make fields, and how the electromagnetic fields can induce a voltage when passing through a coil. In this video, we are going to talk about some of the common pitfalls when using EMF meters, how EMF affects us, and of course, some theories on how spirits may be able to manipulate electromagnetic fields. In the last video, we talked briefly about some of the operating pitfalls of the K2 meter. Now, let's look at some of the ways naturally occurring things create EMF, how some of our own household items create EMF, and how to understand how far these EMF fields can propagate from the source. Well, I guess it's safe to say the largest source of natural EMF is none other than that big ball of fire in the sky we call the sun. The second largest would be the Earth. That's right, the Earth is constantly emitting its own electromagnetic field, which is generated from the movement of our molten iron core, which is also called geodynamo. We can even see the interaction of the sun's release of charged particles on Earth's electromagnetic field in the auroras. A beautiful display of Earth defending us against those harmful waves. Other natural sources of EMF are thermal radiation, the visible light spectrum, ultraviolet light from the sun, and even fire and lightning produce EMF. But the source that could really throw paranormal investigators for a loop is rocks. Yep, rocks. How is this possible, you may be asking? Well, it's simple, really. When rocks form, the Earth's electromagnetic field is actually captured in the rock as it cools. Visualize this. Magma from deep inside the Earth erupts and flows down the side of a volcano. The iron and minerals in that lava will align, just like a compass, to the Earth's electromagnetic field. In some rock formations, especially those high in iron and other minerals, it can actually create magnetism. And magnetite, being one of the strongest magnetic minerals, is found in lodestone. The study of this phenomena has helped us understand plate tectonics and most recently been used in studying the crustal magnetism on Mars. But another fascinating aspect of mineral formations is that we know that certain minerals can 1. Hold an electrical charge, and 2. Vibrate at very specific rates when a voltage or magnetic field is applied. And I just heard a number of voices say, so what? Well, let's look at another device that's able to store charges. That's right, none other than your computer's hard drive or memory. Most people think the data storage in computers is very complex. Well, it is to an extent. However, the disk or memory chip just contains a charge for a 1 or no charge for a 0. This concept alone is mind-blowing. Think about this. That terabyte memory chip in your SSD has 1.6 to the 13th power of bits, or 160 trillion nanocapacitors ready to hold, or not hold, a charge to represent the 1 and 0s of your data. And nature can do it too, which is the technical description of the stone tape theory. While these sources of EMF are natural, they're not very strong. Let's look at how electromagnetic fields are measured and compare some sources. The unit of measurement for electromagnetic fields is the Gauss. The Gauss is named after Carl Friedrich Gauss. He was a geek too. Go figure. Anyway, the Gauss is measuring the magnetic flux density in a magnetic field. We can calculate this with this formula. It's interesting to note that a Gauss unit contains a time variable, m of x, which is a centimeter gram second unit. That's a lot to think about, right? All this means is if we start thinking on a quantum level, there are some really interesting things at play in an additional dimension of space-time and potentially gravity as well. But more on the dimensions of physics in another video. So now we know the unit of measure, but let's compare that unit to get a scope of strength. Here is a chart of values for Gauss measurements. All the way at the bottom is the magnetic field of the human brain with a measurement of 10 to the negative 9th Gauss. Surprised to know the human brain has its own magnetic field? Well, think about it. What is traveling down all those nerves and neurons? The Earth's magnetic field is only a whopping 0.25 to 0.60 Gauss at the surface, but at the core it's 25 Gauss. An iron magnet comes in around 100 Gauss, a sunspot's 1500 Gauss. But the real thing we can see here is that some of the high voltage transformers that make up our electrical grid can contain special iron alloys that can get to 22,000 Gauss. Now let's look at our K2 or other EMF detection devices. Strange. We are measuring in milligauss. That means 1 Gauss is 1,000 milligauss. Not even in full unit values. Why would we do that? Well, the first answer is that electromagnetic field strengths around us are typically very low. And the second answer is that we are measuring the change in fields over time. Remember me talking about that time variable? This means that an EMF field could be steady and strong, but only exhibit a very small fluctuation in the field, which would read very small on our meters. Now, when we are establishing a baseline in a location, there are some places and things to be mindful of. First, any major appliances like washers, dryers, refrigerators, microwaves, etc. These all have higher voltage and amp parts and transformers. These components produce high EMF when in use. Another big EMF source is often found in the electrical panels where all the facility wiring comes together for the main service lines. Now, a source that we often come across and is very often overlooked is the power line transformers. In some commercial facilities, these units can propagate electromagnetic fields 100 feet or more at incredibly high levels, like this case. Now let's talk about some not so obvious sources of EMF. I think for me, the most overlooked sources of EMF are found in a place's plumbing. That's right, those old copper pipes. And in some rare cases, lead pipes. Well, these can produce EMF. One way this can happen is the water in the pipes. Water isn't always neutrally charged. Sometimes the water is partially ionized or contains enough minerals that the water will be able to excite the electrons in the copper and produce an electromagnetic field. But just the action of the water flowing in the pipes can generate very low-level EMF, all on its own. Another way plumbing causes EMF is sometimes electrical lines run near copper pipes, and they can become subject to a faulty ground. And these two items can interact and cascade EMF down the copper pipes. This also means that you should check for EMF leakage near outlets and known junction boxes. Sometimes you have to go to the attic to see some of these. What's your EMF sweep secrets? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's talk about the side effects of high EMF exposure. First, we need to talk about the two classifications of electromagnetic waves. The first is non-ionizing electromagnetic waves. These are made up of the large wavelength of waves like radio waves and the visible light spectrum. These waves are fairly harmless, but if the power is high enough, then the waves on the lower end can actually cause nerve stimulation and muscle contractions. We really don't have to worry about these effects during our investigation because the power required to generate them would mean that the location is supporting massive power lines, transformers, and antennas. However, if you are investigating an old radio station or industrial complex, these could very well be present. Now, ionizing electromagnetic waves are a very different subject. These waves can cause mutations in your DNA. Repeated exposure or high-powered exposure to ionizing electromagnetic waves can be fatal. Sources for these waves are found in UV rays, X-rays, and cosmic gamma rays. Exposure to these waves can come from a number of natural and manufactured sources. Special attention should be made at healthcare facilities and military sites. Now, let's talk about what happens to us when we are exposed to high EMF over long periods of time. High electromagnetic fields can often be found near very large power sources like our home's electrical panels, transformers on power lines, and large appliances. How high is high, you ask? Well, it's a good question. The US standard for exposure on a limited basis is 100 milligauss. So if you have something that is sending out this amount or higher, you can expect to have some level of EMF side effects, which are, for our nervous system, you could have side effects like fatigue, high stress, sleep interruptions, paranoia, feelings of being watched, hallucinations, foggy mind, and depression. You can even have skin symptoms like facial prickling, burning sensations, and rashes. You can even have full body symptoms like pains and aches in muscles, muscle spasms, infertility. It can cause leukemia in children and can even cause breast cancer. As we can see from this list, the neurological symptoms of high EMF exposure could be misdiagnosed as paranormal. We should always do our due diligence to find EMF problems, not just because it could help debunk some of the paranormal claims, but for the rest of this list of side effects. Finding these high EMF issues could frankly save lives. There are a number of theories on how it is believed that spirits can manipulate electromagnetic fields, and a simple internet search can reveal dozens, if not more, theories. Generally, it is believed that spirits either emit their own EMF or disrupt the ambient field, which frankly would happen if anything emitted its own EMF. But how would it even be possible that a deceased person could remain? Well, one possibility lies right in the laws of physics with the law of conservation of energy. Simply put, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only that it changes phases. While we have no real evidence to support this, or any evidence to understand the mechanisms that would allow the continued consciousness to exist outside of our physical bodies, laws like the conservation of energy tell us this energy was not destroyed, but simply transitioned to a new form of energy. The pursuit of knowledge in these mechanisms may be deemed paranormal. However, so is the idea that the Earth was round, and the atom was the smallest particle. So we can clearly see that today's paranormal is tomorrow's new physics breakthrough. Therefore, if we follow this ideology and use some of the information presented so far, then we can make some logical conclusions on how spirits can manipulate electromagnetic fields. If our energy is not destroyed by death but transferred to a new state, then that energy will still affect the world around us. For all we know, this new state of energy is actually a new dimension of existence, and we simply can't perceive it all the time. But the moments we do, those are our experiences. Much like a line in a two-dimensional world can't tell the difference in a square or a circle. That's a Flatland reference for you really nerdy people out there. And just like we, as a physical being, can manipulate our physical world, an energy being would presumably be able to manipulate its energy world. And moreover, if that being was truly a higher dimensional being now, then it could manipulate all our lower dimensions, just like we manipulate all the dimensions lower to us. For example, that same line segment would freak out if all of a sudden a new line segment appeared, all because he never saw us use the pencil on the paper. Lastly, if energy moving creates electromagnetic fields, then as a spirit moves, their motion leaves the detectable traces of electromagnetic fields. We are going to get deeper into this subject in part 3, and trust me, you want to watch part 3. No spoilers. I want to leave you with this previous information to see what your hypothesis is, so please leave your thoughts in the comments, and in part 3, we will dive into the answers. I hope you're enjoying this series so far. Please leave us a like if you are, and if you've made it this far, I hope that means you found this topic interesting. If so, I hope that means we've earned your subscription. And until next time, I'm Chad with the Ghost Geeks, and remember, talk nerdy to me.